So Collective Shout are an organisation that's extremely liberal, in the sense that if a woman has big tatters in a game, they start crying. Now overall their movement is actually pretty wild. They want to ban anything in any way that references women, and they want to ban everything that hurts their feelings. And the frustrating thing about all of this is they realise that games developers think that they're cringe and they won't listen to them. So instead they went after the payment processors, contacting companies like MasterCard and basically spamming companies like MasterCard to the point where they just had to listen and couldn't ignore it anymore. And payment processors like MasterCard threatened to pull their payment gateways from these various games developers and online stores, essentially saying, look, you have to remove these games that feature these things, otherwise we won't be able to support payments through your platform anymore. And it worked. Initially, we started seeing games getting pulled left, right and centre. Now, to be clear, a lot of the games that were pulled, I couldn't care less about. I think some of them were pretty trash anyway, but I still think that they have the right to be available because art shouldn't be restricted because your feelings were hurt. So whilst I don't like or even agree with some of the games that were on these platforms, I agree for their ability to be there. But Collective Shout went to the nth degree to make sure all of these games were removed, and we're now starting to see games development studios fighting back. And also, we can prove that Collective Shout are hypocrites. But before we get into that, if you want to have an untracked, unfiltered and safe experience browsing the web, make sure you check out Private Internet Access VPN down below. For me personally, I absolutely love it because it means I can just log into the American Netflix and watch their shows because it's better than the British Netflix, but also means I don't need to submit ID for every single website in the UK that has anything that might contain something that our beloved government think is bad. So by using my link down below, you get 4 months free, 86% off, and you support the channel because your homie's got rent to pay. Now, let's get back to the video. So itch.io have slowly started restoring not safe for work games to their platform. Now, at the moment, they're only doing it for their free games. They're not doing it for their paid games because they currently don't have a payment processor that would actually handle those games. But they've done this as a point to prove that they will not cave to the pressure from Collective Shout. Now, this is really good for the industry because this starts to set, as we discussed in other videos, precedent. Once you set precedent that you're willing to stand up against this, payment processors, they are losing money too. So if every single store, games developer, studio, whatever it might be, if they all start fighting back, MasterCard will cave. Once MasterCard realise that, yes, Collective Shout are very vocal, but they're also a very small minority that no one cares about, we'll start to return to some sense of normality, because at the moment, what we're seeing is absolutely insane. At the moment, itch.io are looking for a new payment processor to actually enable them to list these games that Collective Shout deem offensive. And I've heard it through the grapevine that some other storefronts are also about to fight back, but we will cover that soon, and I'm currently trying to arrange an interview, so keep your eyes peeled for that. That will probably be over on my main channel, which is the gaming channel. Now, one of the people that are kind of heading up this movement by Collective Shout is someone called Caitlin Roper. Now, she's been very vocal on X as well as other platforms about how they're doing this, and for some reason she seems to think that she's in the right. Now, the biggest argument that's been raised by the gaming community is that context really does matter, and that's something that I do agree with. Is it telling it for the sake of story? Is it showing it to build up a character? What artistic liberties and what artistic right does the person creating that particular scene have? And Caitlin Roper's argument is that context doesn't matter. Anything that she deems disgusting should not be on these websites. Well, in that case, if context doesn't matter and the narrative and the arc of the story and what happens within that story doesn't matter to whether that content is actually inappropriate or not, why is she posting it all over her Twitter, and why is that okay? Is it because she's one of the good girls? No. It's because she's a hypocrite. If her argument that the context in which this content appears doesn't matter, her posting it is just as bad as it being in the game. Her referencing it for the point of free speech and discussion, which by the way she doesn't believe in, shouldn't matter, because the context is completely devoid. So why is it okay for her to post this harmful content to her Twitter to criticize it if it's not okay for that same content to be in the very games? And this is where the censorship argument completely falls apart for people like Collective Shout. They merely and simply do not have the brain capacity to understand that everything that they're arguing against, the fact that they're utilizing their freedom of speech to speak against these things, is the same thing that they criticize everyone else for doing. The other thing is they've been trolled hard. Like, people are saying some absolutely abhorrent shit, which I'm 99.9% sure none of these people actually mean. I don't think they're legitimate threats, but they're turning some like 20 or so offhand comments made by troll accounts that clearly are troll accounts into the whole narrative that all men in gaming are misogynistic, sexist, and the rest of the stuff that you can add to that list of things that they hate about gamers. Now, the thing that's really interesting to me, as obviously a gaming fan, is that personally I can look at a piece of art and go, I think that's shit. I can look at Collective Shout and think, damn, these women need to shave their armpits. That's not going to go down well. But the point is these are all opinions, and pressuring payment providers into caving to your demands because your feelings were hurt is not the answer. Now, one of Collective Shout's biggest arguments is that the women in these games are being objectified. Now, I looked at a few of the games that they actually got removed, and these games all had motion capture in them, where the voice actors who were apparently being objectified did the motion capture themselves. So these voice actors were fully aware of the scene, and they had the ability to walk away or say no, but they didn't. It's almost like these voice actors are perfectly okay with the artistic liberties taken in the scenes, and they're fully aware of what was going to happen within those scenes because they acted them. Gaming isn't just pixels on a screen. Gaming today is motion capture, animation, dialogue, everything captured in-house, sometimes even the whole scene captured in its entirety. I personally feel that Collective Shout are actually taking the voices away from the female actors in the industry that have the ability to speak their own mind on what they think about the end product. Because so far, all the examples they've used is things that they don't like, but they've not once referenced the women's opinions who actually featured in these games. Collective Shout clearly do not care about women or female actors in the industry because they're not listening to them. If these women in the industry had issues with the way that they were portrayed in the games that they acted in, which they chose to be in, which they signed contracts to be in, which they had the ability to walk away from, surely we'd see, I don't know, maybe a fucking tweet about it? Nothing. Now, some of the games that were pulled from the stores have actually emailed a couple of their developers to talk about this stuff, and hopefully I can get some interviews in place because I'd love to share that with you guys and actually see it from the other perspective. Whilst I may not like some of the games, I personally think some of the games are pretty fucking boring that they removed and I wouldn't have played them anyway. I think it's the same as freedom of speech. I might not like what Collective Shout have to say, I believe they have the right to say it, but I can also call them out for it just as much. And this comes down to freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and how these hairy armpit lunatics are going to payment processes because they know that arguments have no merit by themselves. Now, after doing some more research whilst editing this video, I found out that Collective Shout actually overreached. A lot of games that were removed were games that some Collective Shout supporters really liked. What happened is when they contacted MasterCard, of course, things went too far. MasterCard didn't want to be seen as a sexist organization, so they went to these games developers and storefronts and basically said to them, hey, we've got to remove all of these games. Now, a lot of the big games that were actually removed were games that some people who support Collective Shout were big fans of. So now a lot of supporters of Collective Shout are trying to backtrack and try to get some games relisted, although they contain the very same content that Collective Shout are against, because they just happen to be fans of those games. So this isn't about protecting women in gaming or how women are perceived and showcased in gaming. This is more about getting games removed that they think are offensive, but games that they don't enjoy. Because if they do enjoy the game, all of a sudden it's not offensive. Funny how that works. Collective Shout have it all over their website, how they've got different wins and how they're winning against the industry, but the very industry that they claim to be winning against is full of up-and-coming female developers that are completely in control and in charge of their own games and games development cycle. They control the narrative of what they put in their games, and some of these games have content in them that Collective Shout deem as unacceptable, but the truth is that what Collective Shout are actually doing is taking away empowerment from women that want to tell stories that sometimes reenact real events or personal experiences in the video game medium to help make that scenario or contextual information understood. What we're seeing is exactly the same as what's happening with the Online Safety Act. They go after the low-hanging fruit, which is child safety, and they do something which is a massive overreach in the name of doing something for the greater good. But in reality, yes, maybe some harmful games were removed. 1 or 2. But in the process, they got rid of over 20,000 games, some of which games just contain things like freedom and artistic expression, sometimes by female creators who wanted to tell their own stories, and the actual net result of that is a negative impact on the gaming industry, a negative impact on women, and silencing women that just want their stories to be told through the medium of gaming. But I also think that we need to tackle this at the source of what Collective Shout are doing. I could argue that a lot of the people within this organization do not care less about what they're actually doing, and it's more about the fact that they are getting paid to do it. They have partnerships with many organizations, which of course are charities. Charity is good. Charity for a bad cause is bad. And they have monthly subscriptions set up where people can give them money to keep fighting the good fight. Now, you may be wondering where the expose comes into all of this. Well, Collective Shout say that they rely on donations to keep their operations going and enable them to actually go out there and make a big difference in the world. Well, if we look at their financial reports, we can see the money that came in and the money that went out on good causes. Where is it all going? Because the majority of their staff are volunteers and most of their messaging is done online, unless the business, the charity, is being used to buy personal assets. And we have a whole video coming about that next week. So yeah, we're going to start to see games developers and storefronts now fighting back against this because it limits freedom of expression, and Collective Shout will be forgotten about in about 6 months. Thank you for watching. Make sure you go and check out private internet access at the link below, and I'll see you all in the next one.